why should they read the book? What benefit would it give them?
This is going to address all religions.
Right.
This book opens the way for revelation. Muslims didn't really know what to do. Scientific advancement, scientific investigation, philosophical inquiry. How do we react?
People are praising the book, and
Yeah.
I'm talking about opponents.
Yes.
They're praising the book.
They read it, they love it, they fall in love. It's magnificent. And that is what Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya is all about.
Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, arguably one of the greatest books of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam. It's 5 parts.
Yes, it is.
Have you gone through it?
I have. It's important you ask. I have gone through it. I have read it. And why it's important is because most of the people, especially the opponents, commenting on it, they haven't actually read it. But I must say, I don't want to make a bold claim at the start. It's a magnificent book, but it requires more than one reading, multiple readings for one to be able to grasp the meaning.
Okay, so why is it, you're talking about grasping the meaning and all these things, why is it that scholars of Islam who are also opponents of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, they praise this book like anything, and this is since it was written, and then suddenly there's a retraction, and then they start raising questions about the book. So it's so confusing that there's all this praise and then there's all these questions at the same time.
That's absolutely right. And it's really good you've picked up this pattern, because it actually has turned into a pattern. So they read Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, they end up praising it. It's historically been the case ever since the time of Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadian, the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, the author of the book. This is what has happened. They read it, they love it, they fall in love, and then all of a sudden, you see them retracting. And not only retracting, spending the rest of their life trying to wipe that off and just kind of hoping that everybody forgets that I ever praised this book.
So this is
This is love and hate.
Yeah, exactly. And even to this day, you know, people are praising the book, and I'm talking about opponents.
Yes.
They're praising the book. And the reason I want to emphasize this is because, you know, when everyone's talking about Ahmadiyyat and Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam, there's all this negativity. And so anyone who's listening who's not an Ahmadi, who's researching Ahmadiyyat, I just want to put out there that there is recorded praise of this first kind of series of books, which Hazrat Ahmad wrote. How far does this go?
I think that's absolutely 100% right. And like I said, it's developed into a pattern. That's what has been happening historically. That is what we see happening today. What actually happens, what I've been able to identify, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, and this is my understanding. They read the book. It's magnificent. And I hope you'll let me go into
we will.
Telling you why I think it's a magnificent book. They read it, they fall in love, and then all of a sudden, they realize that this book opens the way for revelation. This book, alongside being magnificent in so many ways, it's also, the spiritual gems aside, it's a book of epistemology, knowledge of knowledge, sources of knowledge. Now, Hazrat Ahmad in the book, because we must remember it was written at a time, it's the fringes of the age of enlightenment, as the world entered into the modern society.
So if you just go, what years was this written in?
It was written around the end of 1870s and completed in the early 1880s, right? So the world is entering into the modern, the modern society has taken shape, right? Empiricism is rampant. Anything that, because that's coming from the West, right?
Yeah.
So the West is advising the world, anything that cannot be touched or seen or heard or smelled, if your 5 senses can't attest to it, it doesn't exist. Rationalism is at its height. Pure reason. If you can't reason something, it doesn't exist, simply. Now, amidst that, Hazrat Ahmad alayhi salam, the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, the author of the book, comes with an idea that no, there is another source of knowledge, which is revelation. Because where reason stops, where reason ends, where reasoning can take you no further in acquiring certain knowledge. And it can't. I mean, the world is, you have to accept it. The things you cannot rationalize. That is where God sends revelation to guide the world in the right direction. Now, when the opponents come to that, remember, it's the clergy most of the times, the opponents. So they're loving the book, reading it, enjoying it, taking their notes.
Yeah.
And that is when their business potentially shuts down.
Why?
Because revelation for them is closed, the door to revelation. It's never going to come back again. God is never going to speak. The author of the book, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, the promised Messiah, he says, no attribute of God, no characteristic of God can ever cease to exist. So God will always continue to communicate with man.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify here, what do you mean by revelation here? Are you talking about a new book?
Revelation, we're talking about, because you see, as Muslims, we believe, as Hazrat Ahmad believed, the Quran is the full and final book of Allah. There is absolutely no other book, no other Sharia, no other divine law coming from Allah the Almighty. Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, atmamtu alaykum ni'mati. That is sealed. There's nothing more coming. But then with the passage of time, it has to be understood in every time and age. In that time and age, when Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya was written, the time was such that Muslims really were perplexed and didn't know what to do with, because obviously the source of knowledge, worldly knowledge, was all the disciplines. They were progressing, and they were progressing, day by the day in the West. And the knowledge, and then that knowledge would come to the East. Muslims didn't really know what to do. Scientific advancement, scientific investigation, philosophical inquiry. How do we react? In doing that, how you react, you can boldly identify 2 or 3 schools. One, where they said that Islam is maybe not an outdated religion, because obviously they are Muslims and they tend to be Muslims. Not an outdated religion, but it has to adapt to modern scientific inquiry. Mm-hmm. You find another one that says religion altogether, Islam or otherwise, is not required at all. And then you have a third one, which says that we do not want Western knowledge. We cannot have it, because whatever is in the Quran, whatever is in the Hadith, is sufficient for us. We're not going out of it. We're not going to reinterpret it. We're not going to understand it. We're going to take it as it is. And that wasn't working, because the Quran was sent as the final book for all times to come.
Yeah.
So it had to be compatible with all times to come. All times had to be compatible, rather. The school where Mirza Sahib belongs, the author of Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, he did believe that a modern interpretation of the Quran is required more than ever before. Mm-hmm. Because that was the time when the eschatological signs had begun to appear. Those that we find in the Holy Quran, those that we find in the Hadith of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it was at that point he said that this is the time. And what was that time? It was the 14th century of Islam. Mm-hmm. And that was the time exactly when the promised Messiah, the savior of the latter days, was prophesied to appear. So that communication with man was supposed to happen through, and the Mujaddid of the age, the promised Messiah of that time, the savior of the latter days, who was meant to appear at that time. So God communicated to him, and it's not a new book. It's about understanding, because some people say,
Yeah, just to interject there. So just to clarify, as you've explained, is that the Quran is final, but because there was a need for the wrong teachings which had crept into Islam to be rectified, Allah had to communicate to Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam. Of course, that communion happened, but it wasn't a new book. It was to guide Muslims on back to the right path.
Yes.
According to the age as well.
Of course.
Okay.
Because, everything was changing.
Yeah.
So rapidly changing.
So what you're saying about everything is changing, can you give So let's talk about India. That's where he came. What's the backdrop? What's the religious backdrop? What's the political backdrop? What's happening?
Absolutely. That's very important because we're talking of colonial India.
Colonial India.
Right? It's the colonial days. The British are ruling. It's British India.
Yeah.
And that alone is still something that was not comprehensible to the natives because it was a foreign ruler. The Hindus were kind of all right because they'd undergone the experience of the Muslims coming to rule. Muslims saw it as their land, their rule being taken away rather.
Yeah.
And a foreign ruler, which happens also not to be Muslim, but a Christian ruler coming to rule them. And along them came a whole band of missionaries.
Christian missionaries.
Christian missionaries, because the British would allow religious freedom, just as to Hindus or to the Muslims or to the Sikhs, and also to the Christians. So a whole influx of missionaries, Christian missionary societies start arriving. Very organized. There was no other religion at that time, Islam or Hinduism or whatever, that was as organized in proselytizing, in defending their religion, as were the Christian missionary societies. They came with the press. They were publishing their tracts and treatises and articles and books left, right, and center. The Bible was being printed, published there, distributed all over India. And they were approaching all religions, adherents of all religions, and taking the message of Christianity to them. Not only the message of Christianity. The doctor is Christian because they brought hospitals.
Yeah.
The teacher, because they brought schools, is Christian. The provider, because they had charities running where they would provide food to people as well in the underprivileged areas. All of them are Christians. And then they go to the Muslim, the innocent Muslim, and ask them, if you were to decide between two boats, which boat would you want to be in? You want to cross a river? You want to be in a boat where its sailor has died? Or do you want to be in a boat where the sailor is still alive? The answer was, of course, where the sailor is still alive.
Yeah.
So what have your Maulvis told you? Jesus is alive, right? And they would say, yes, that's what Maulvi Sahib has told us. And Muhammad is dead. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Yes, that's what we've been told. So, all right, come on then, jump into the right boat. And they were jumping in thousands and hundreds of thousands.
So Muslims were accepting Christianity.
Absolutely. They were accepting. I mean, to give you one example, I mean, Reverend Imaduddin was Maulvi Imaduddin.
Right.
And he was probably one of those who had accompanied Rahmatullah Kiranvi to the debate. And after the debate, I think there was this change of heart.
So a Muslim scholar became a reverend.
Sayyid, Sadat, right? So allegedly from the line of the Prophet, the progeny of the Prophet. So they were leaving. Innocent Muslims were leaving. It was at this time where Islam had to be properly explained in, to a society in the modern world.
Just on that, were the Christians, what kind of attacks were happening on Islam or debates and...
Yeah, I mean, the debate, it was like...
You've given one example.
One example. And there were other examples as well. The one thing that they would always point to was the sectarian divide. Because that divide was actually rife at that time.
Especially in India.
Especially in India, because of the foreign ruler. Muslims, scholars even were grappling with the fact of how to deal with this foreign ruler, what to do with them. Shall we fight them off?
Yeah.
Can we fight them off? Should we fight them off? What should we do? Have there been attempts? Yes, we've seen the mutiny of 1857. Did it work? No, it didn't work. The defeat was shameful. What do we do? Now, there were some that thought it is Darul Islam. We don't need to fight them off because they give us religious freedom and freedom of expression and freedom of faith. But then there were others who said, no, we want to fight them. We have to fight them off. Let me tell you one more thing, just to clarify. And I take responsibility for saying that. Majority of the Muslims and their leaders were in favor that India, Hindustan, was Darul Islam. That the British granted them freedom of expression, freedom of faith, freedom of religion, and they ought not to be fought off.
So they accepted the British rule.
They accepted the British rule, thanked the British rule. You say whatever you like about Mirza Sahib, alayhi salam. But all of them and their followers today, they can try as much as they like without evidence, because they can't bring evidence.
Yeah.
Their elders were deeply in love with the British. They'd never seen that time, such a time where everybody was independent to practice, profess, proclaim, practice their religion. So that such was the time. And that sectarian divide was one of the things that, it was easy for other faiths to highlight. I mean, even Hindus were taking Muslims into their fold. Right? Christians were taking Muslims into their fold. Muslims were literally on their knees in every sense of the term.
So you've got Muslims divided, confused, you've got the British Empire there now as well. So and you mentioned the influence of the Christian missionaries as well, attacking Islam, converting Muslims to Christianity. So Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, where does that fit in?
Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, when it came to surface, was many years ahead of its time.
Okay. How so?
So we're talking of Christian missionaries, we're talking of Hindus, and we're talking of their attempts to, the Shuddhi movement, bringing the people back into Hinduism. We've got Brahmo Samaj and we've got Arya Samaj, because that was a novel concept. Hindus were never a proselytizing faith.
Right, yeah.
So, but then you had these sects who were emerging, reform movements, taking Muslims into their fold. So that was one thing happening. The author, Hazrat Mirza Sahib, was looking way beyond that. He was looking at the tide that was yet to come.
Okay.
And he was asked, why are you writing another book? When there is so much literature already written, why add another book to it? And you don't even have the money. You're asking people to donate.
Yeah.
So why not just leave it alone? There's so many books already. He said, this book is needed because before this, there has been no book, one, that addresses all faiths. Yes, there are many books. Some address the Christians, some address the Hindus, some address this religion, some address Buddhism. This is going to address all religions.
Right.
And it did. And it came with a challenge of 10,000 rupees, by the way, that anyone from any other faith, if they can counter, because it was all Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, what for? To prove the truthfulness of Islam and the supremacy of Islam over all other religions.
I think that's important because, when it comes to semantics, people say, oh no, he's trying to prove Ahmadiyya,
Yes,
the arguments for Ahmadiyya. But even on the cover,
it says,
to
prove the truthfulness, to defend the truthfulness of the Quran, of the Holy Quran and Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. Right? Now, what I said, it was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
He also said, Hazrat Mirza Sahib alayhi salam, the promised Messiah, that the challenge that Islam or religion altogether is facing at this time is unprecedented. Faith, especially Islam, has never ever faced such a challenge before. Because atheism, through philosophical movements, was rampant in the West and growing. And it was also washing the shores of the colonies, and very fast, very steadily, very swiftly. And those ideas of faithlessness were spreading. And he felt the need. This is one of the elements that makes it a magnificent book. It was looking way ahead of its time.
Mm-hmm.
It was this faithlessness that wasn't, atheism didn't happen, just didn't come about overnight, that one morning people got up and said, oh, we're not going to stop.
Yeah.
We're going to stop believing in God. No, it didn't happen like that. It took time. So sowing those seeds of doubt against religion, questioning your tenets of faith, is what the Western philosophical movements were doing. Right? And that was manifesting all over the world.
Yeah.
And it was that where Hazrat Mirza Sahib alayhi salam says, that is where we need to turn the tide. We need God more than ever before. We need to prove God more than ever before. We need to rely on God more than ever before. And that is where, in this book, the greatest thing is, in all of the rift that went on between the religions, they were writing against each other, doing munazaras against each other, street preaching as they would call it. But was someone actually looking of what is coming?
Yeah.
There are a couple of people who were. So Sayyid Ahmad Khan probably was one of the more far-sighted people. He knew what's coming. Was he tackling it well? His approach was what Anne-Marie Schimmel very rightly calls Anglophilic approach.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to twist and turn Islam to suit the agenda of the West, or to seem compatible with the West. Hazrat Mirza Sahab, the author of Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, came with that pushback to turn the tide of atheism and faithlessness. And that is what Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya is all about.
Yeah, that's great. So let's go into more topics then. So first of all, I actually want to ask you what Muhammad Hussein Balvi, it's a name of a very prominent opponent of Ahmadiyya from the time Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam. Tell me about what he said about the book before we go into more subject matters and the issues.
Mm-hmm.
And what was his importance? Because, you know, in the discussions that happened today with opponents of Ahmadiyya, they say, who is this Muhammad Hussein Balvi? He's a random person. But he wasn't a random person.
Of course he wasn't. I mean, he was editing one of their very important, the Ali Hadith is a very important publication by the name of Ishaat Sunnah. He was a mouthpiece. He was a spokesperson.
He was a co-founder of the Ahl Hadith movement.
He was a co-founder, yes, absolutely. So he was important. Now he sees it before Hazrat Mirza Sahab claims to be the promised Messiah and to be appointed by God. He sees it as a work which has no parallel in the 1300-year history of Islam. No parallel. He knew what he was talking about. He was a scholar.
Yeah.
We must give him that.
Yeah, he was a scholar.
He knew that there was Bukhari. He knew that there was Muslim. He knew that there were all these Sihah.
Yeah.
And he knew that there was all of Ghazali. And he knew that there was all of Ibn Taymiyyah. And he knew that there was all of Allama this and Allama that.
All the tafasir, the
voluminous works. He was aware of that. Now this book, he said, none of them can be seen as a parallel. I don't think, and nor would we. I mean, it's not like we undermine the importance of those books, right? They had their own importance. But this book has something very special that even Muhammad Hussain Balvi had to acknowledge. And even people today have to acknowledge and then spend the rest of their life
accidentally say.
Just trying to tell the world, oh, no, please. No. That is a tragedy. I mean, that's happening everywhere.
I mean,
anybody who speaks in favor of the Ahmadiyya community says, this persecution shouldn't happen. They get, just hammered with all sorts of remarks and they have to retract and say, oh, no, we didn't mean that. I'm so sorry. That's not what I meant. Hate them.
Yeah.
I also hate them now. Right?
Exactly.
So that's what he saw it as an unparalleled work. Now you would want to know why, isn't it?
Exactly. So what is it? There's so many other books like you mentioned. So Sayyid, all these people are writing about Islam. What is in the subject matter? What's in the book that is so? You've spoken about. I think that's very important. Is how you said that he's addressing all these philosophical and atheistic ideas. He's taking a point of rationality and explaining religion from a point of rationality as well. The point of revelation. What else is, so if someone wants to go read the book,
right.
I also want to ask you, actually, I think it'll be good, how should one read the book? Because I understand part 1 and part 2, a lot of them are just, there's advertisement in there, or not advertisement, more he's explaining certain things about the book. So where does the main content come? What's in the book? There's 5 parts, and we're going to get to 50 and 5, where he promised that I would do 50.
Definitely.
So yeah.
Right. I'll come to that later, how one should read it.
Yeah, okay.
You want to ask me how I read it?
Yeah.
I just read it from here and there.
Okay.
I start because I tried a couple of times, because obviously we're living in a different age. We must remember, books weren't written the way we used to them these days, that you open them and then you've got a credit page where, the print line and everything, and then there's a table of contents, and then there is this, and there's they were written very different way.
Yeah.
Hazrat Mirza Sahab, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, the promised Messiah, the Imam Mahdi. During the time when he was writing this book, he said, I was the writer. I would take it to the scribe. I would proofread it. I would take it to the press. I would go and read the proof. And then once they were finalized and the print run would go through, I would go and pick up the whole load of books, put them in a bulk cart, and bring them back home, and then arrange for their distribution. Things were a lot different. And you said you're going to come to 5 and 50? Please do, because I love that bit of this discussion.
We will.
Right?
We will.
So it was very... So he would write, and it would keep going to the scribe, and things were put together, so, and then he would write, say, a footnote, and the footnote would get longer, and then it would go some. So it's a particular...
Very different way of writing.
Very different way of writing. So me being from this age, I tried, like from reading cover to cover in order. But the way I found it helpful was go to the index, find anything that attracts you, go to it and read it. And it's that index where you'll find all the gems. And let me tell you one more thing, Father. If our opponents were honest, and if they remained honest, and if they'd read the book, it's impossible that they would not praise the gems that are inside the book. How beautifully the teachings of the Holy Quran are explained. How beautifully some issues have been resolved. How beautifully some questions have been answered. Now, what is in the book?
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a treasure trove. Am I just claiming that? Let me tell you, let me tell the viewers as well. I honestly don't say this only because I'm an Ahmadi and a follower of Hazrat Mirza Sahib alayhi salam. I say this because I believe so. Because I want to see, I have yet to see, some scholars or some circles who were actually working on Islamic epistemology. Anyone who was there was no one. Absolutely, there had been in the medieval and the classical times who were saying that yes, the door of revelation is open, it can open, cannot open. The debates had been happening in that day and age. How many people were there actually putting this word out to the world? Because it was about the dead sailor and the living sailor. So it was about telling the world that yes, the Holy Prophet ﷺ might have died, but before he died, he told his followers that I leave behind two things: the book, i.e. the Holy Quran, and the Sunnah, and the Holy Prophet's Sunnah. So always seek guidance from that. So, was there anyone who was telling the world, this world, that yes, the Holy Prophet ﷺ might have died? He said this before he died. And he lived behind a living book, a living example, and a living God, a God that still speaks. Senses are important. He goes into detail. Reasoning is important. But the importance of revelation cannot be denied. So that makes it a great book in Islamic epistemology, if you like. And he proudly presents it to the world and challenges anyone from any faith to come, and even says, even if somebody is faithless, come back with a refutation of my arguments, and I am happy to pay a reward of 10,000 rupees. The challenge laid open. It's 134, 35 years now. The challenge lies open even today.
Yeah.
Nobody has come ever forward. Nobody will come forward.
I think also, until people don't read it.
Until they read it, they won't.
They won't realize.
Because, like I said, his sole focus was around the existence of God. Because he knew that the materialistic world, or the Western world, or Western knowledge, Western philosophy, Western scientific investigation is going to hit the axe right at the root of religion. And that is God. And it was God that had to be proven to the entire world. So, you move out of epistemology, you find yourself in a realm of Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, which is just unparalleled at that time when it was being written, even today.
Even today,
Even
this
before.
atheism is such a big issue in the Muslim world.
You find yourself in the realm of sociolinguistics, because Hazrat Mirza Sahib alayhi salam presents language, the origin of language as a proof for the existence of God. He knew that modern atheism was going to be based, or was actually based, on the Darwinian theory of evolution. And if one is to follow that or accept that as true, that man has evolved from apes, then that would just leave, the biblical creationism and the Quranic creationism all just absolutely redundant.
Yeah.
And they just fall apart. Because that would mean that man has just originated from certain material, as the Darwinian theory goes. So taking that into account, he took language to be the unique feature that human beings have. And we're talking of 1870s, 80s, say 80s, all right. That is when it came to surface, right? Part 4, early 80s, 1880s. He's talking at that time on behalf of Islam, trying to prove God in a very unique manner and a very convincing manner. You have to read it, because I'm not going to go into quotes and start reading them from there. I want people to go and read it and really come back and tell us that they have read it and how they found it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very easy to just go through some tweets here and there, mockery, laughters, emojis, and come back and say, oh, Barahin is this, Barahin is that. Sociolinguistics, before even the term actually was coined, because what is sociolinguistics? How language actually originated and how it has helped shape the society. So that was not around until 1939.
Wow.
You see?
And he's already addressing this.
He's already addressing it. And he's using it as a unique example to prove that there are different theories. I mean, it isn't a new debate. I mean, it has always been, around.
As a formal science.
It turned into a formal science, but even in Islam, there have been, whether it's Tawqifi or whether it's, through interaction in the society. But at that time, when it was most needed, this argument is very unique. It's not coming from anywhere but Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace and blessings of Allah be on him, where he's using the Al-Mahdi. He said it was directly revealed to man. And he uses Surah Al-Baqarah verse 31, or with Bismillah verse 32, where Allah the Almighty says that we taught Adam the names of all things. So that is where he says that, continuing the discussion of revelation, he says another proof is that man was directly taught language through God.
Right.
It was installed through revelation. It was divinely inspired. Man was divinely inspired to be able to learn language. It was taught directly. So it takes you into, from the realm of epistemology, it takes you into sociolinguistics. So you want to say something?
Yeah, no, exactly. You're talking about, the epistemology, sociolinguistics. I just remember when you were talking about how he was, cutting the root of what's to come, and that's that wave of atheism, wave of philosophy. And it rung a bell that in part 5 he talks about reason a lot.
Of course.
Addresses reason, and it was exactly at that time where you have the Christians in India spreading Christianity, but back home in Europe or France, England, Germany, you have the philosophers talking about reason in the cafes of Paris, and
Vienna,
and exactly, and no one's talking about that in the Muslim world.
And not only in part 5, even in part 4, part 3 actually, he says that it's, if we continue the way we're moving or drifting away from religion, and the way West is making us drift away from religion, the time is not far when people, instead of saying Assalamu alaikum, will only be saying good morning and good afternoon and good evening. Right? So he'd seen the dangers.
Yeah.
And we have seen that, yes, I mean, people can take pride in, opposing the Prophet Islam, but we've seen that is what actually has happened.
Exactly.
With this language, I mean, even the language thing, I mean, even today, you have people like Noam Chomsky in his book, what is it, Language and Mind, I believe. He says, although,
he's a political analyst, but he's a linguistic.
He's linguistic. He says that one thing that we've not been able to establish is how man actually acquired the ability to communicate through language.
Right.
Richard Dawkins, I think the most famous flag bearer of atheism of our times, most well known.
Yeah.
Unweaving the Rainbow,
Mm-hmm.
he says, we are not able to understand. It's something very unique to humans. There have been experiments where they've tried to teach apes, which are seen from the Darwinian point of view as the closest cousin of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
They've tried to teach them words, small words, 1 syllable, 2 syllable words.
It doesn't.
It hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And even if that was to happen, and that also is clarified by the Prophet ﷺ, that not only teaching of words was through God, was revealed, the ability to put them in a coherent order, which you call syntax in linguistics, is something so unique that no animal, and this is now being approved by the likes of just named Noam Chomsky and is it Deacon and Richard Dawkins, all saying that this bridge, this gulf between mankind and the rest of the animal world will never be bridged.
Okay, so we've got the social linguistic epistemology and all these different subjects. Again, we urge everyone to read the book. We'll put it in the show note captions as well. You can read it in English as well. It's been translated. But what about, a lot of people will be thinking, what about today? 2024, why should they read the book? What benefit would it give them today?
Thanks for asking. It's a very important question. I think, like I said, a few years. I think that it came a few years before its time, and the author, Hazrat Mirza was looking a few years ahead. I think it was a few decades. I think he was actually looking more than a century ahead of his time. And you ask of 2024? I think more than ever before, we need this book today. Young, old, whatever gender, they need it today. Because it really was ahead of its time. It's talking, you see, at the moment, I think the world's greatest challenge is mental health.
Yeah.
And Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, the author of Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, may God be pleased with him, has gone into the issue of mental health. He's understanding human psychology and explaining it to the world.
Yeah.
He says it in clear-cut terms. Bahut se khauf, tashwish, anxiety that is. And let me tell you, Father, I am from a generation where growing up, we really weren't aware of such terms, panic attacks and anxieties and fears and phobias and etc. Things like that. These days, you've terms for literally everything.
Yeah.
So that wasn't very fashionable to know, even to feel. One could say that, I'm feeling a bit down. I've been feeling a bit down for the last few days, for the last few weeks. But then, even my father, is from I don't think I could ever go to him and tell him I've got anxiety, even if I knew the term.
Yeah.
Because he would say something wrong with you. Maybe you've got nothing to do.
Yeah.
So get yourself busy and make yourself useful. So there was no concept of that. Now that we know that mental health is one of the greatest challenges of the time, Hazrat Mirza Sahib, the author of the book, Peace and Blessings of Allah be upon him, is delving into issues where mental health issues can be resolved. Understanding how it actually works. He gives a beautiful philosophy of how to understand it. Because you see, as they say, there were 3 huge intellectual revolutions that happened in the world. The Copernican Revolution, the Darwinian Revolution, and the Freudian Revolution. Now, Freud actually just changed the whole scene. He just stood it, around the understanding of human psychology. Now, his the model of human mind that he's presented, where he presents the iceberg model, as they call it, where the hummock, which is the top part of the iceberg, which is a little bit, which is above the surface, the bummock, which is the big bulk and which is under the water and can't be seen. He says this is what human mind is like. You only see a little bit of this. The bulk is hidden.
Yeah, subconscious.
The unconscious mind. The Prophet ﷺ, way before that, because Freud was working on this between 1900 and 1905. The Prophet ﷺ, way before that, had told that God Almighty has created mankind in a way that it has two parallel systems running within them. There is a physical system and there is a spiritual system to do with the soul. Now, psychology, if you go into the etymology of it, is the study of the soul.
Yeah.
Millions, billions, trillions of pounds and dollars are invested into the study of psychology. There have been, there still are, you will continue to, because it's such a huge mystery. Psychologists or modern scientists would call it, mind. That is exactly what soul is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the promised Messiah ﷺ said that while Allah is the provider, the Rabb, for the physical side of the body, there's food, other amenities that God the Almighty provides us, He has provided food for the soul as well. And both of these systems need to run parallel. Where one of the limbs of the human personality goes weak, the other cannot function properly.
That's interesting.
There is going to be an imbalance, and that imbalance is going to bring about certain types of fears, certain types of anxieties. So that balance has to be maintained. And again, coming back to Sigmund Freud, he came up with the theory of the id, the ego, and the superego.
Yeah.
Sometime in 1920 when he wrote Beyond the Pleasure Principle. So that's 1920 or around that time. This is way before that, like 3-4 decades at least before that, where the promised Messiah ﷺ is talking of nafs al-lawwama, the middle state that controls the balance between carnal desires and the moral teachings of man. And the greatest source of moral teachings has historically been religion.
Yeah.
So as soon as you drift away from morality, from ethics of your religion, you will lose that balance between mind and body. And mind and body is an issue, and their connection, it goes on from prehistoric times, time immemorial.
Yeah. And now, the balance, is completely off.
Absolutely.
In our modern age. So It's interesting you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That the Prophet Messiah Islam said that both have to be in tandem and working together.
Absolutely.
Again, we want to get everyone to read the book for themselves.
Yes,
I'm going to come now to, I want to say the petty stuff, but, the allegations, if you want to call it that, made against particularly this book. And I do think that the reason the opponents are so forceful against this book is because there's been so much praise of the book as well.
Of course.
So, if you want people if you want to discredit something, you're going to go for the most,
absolutely
prized possession if you want. Or so we've had scholars praising Barahin Ahmadiyya, and at the same time, the next sentence is, but no, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam said that he would write 50 volumes and he only wrote 5, and he said that, look, the difference between 50 and 5 is just one dot.
Right. You've absolutely, although you were paraphrasing, but it's almost quote unquote, the allegation, the way you've put it.
Yeah.
And that is how they say it. That's not where it all started.
Okay.
That he just started the argument with, there's only a difference of a dot in 50 and 5.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
that's not the case.
Yeah, exactly.
You see?
Yeah.
He set off on a journey of writing a book. And from some of his writings, we see that he had actually written the book, or at least the skeleton of the book was ready.
Mm-hmm.
And now he was looking for donations to publish the book.
Yeah.
Right?
Are we talking about the first volumes? Or what are we talking about?
Yeah, the first volumes to initially get it rolling.
Okay.
And he said that as it'll be published, it'll be sent out. So you need to send in your donations, or say not the donations, maybe the price for it. And I'll keep sending it to you. But I need the cost, and because I need these arguments, 300 that he promised at the start, arguments in favor of Islam to get out to the world. So please donate. Please send in your money. I'll start sending you the book.
Yeah.
He did start sending the book. After 4 volumes, Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya per se ceased to publish all the way until volume 5, which was written in the latter part of his
1905,
life,
I
but
believe,
it got published posthumously.
Right.
Now, it ceased after the first 4 parts. One, did he say volumes, jild hai? Because in Urdu you would say jild. He said, मैं इसके इतने हिस्से लिखूंगा.
Hisse.
इतने जुज लिखूंगा.
Yeah.
Juz क्या होता है? What is a juz? I mean, it really makes me sometimes laugh, I don't know, or cry.
Cry,
I don't know.
You don't know.
You see people sitting and talking and recycling the same old allegations without even bothering to understand at least how printing worked in British India on the press machines that were being used at that time.
Yeah.
Right? What a juz actually means. So it's a whole spread.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it makes me feel old, but yes, I am from the generation. I've seen how that works.
Okay,
in newspaper.
nice.
So it's a big spread.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be folded to make 2 pages. Then it's going to be folded another time to make it, how many now? 8?
8.
And then it's going to be folded another time to make it 16 pages. By definition, if our opponents can take a little bit of time to go to any dictionary, say Farhange Asifiya, Farhange Amira maybe, if they want, because we're talking of Urdu, he wrote it in Urdu, to see what a juz actually is. Then look at the first volume that came out. It was this thick only.
Yeah.
No, I think it was like 20, 30 pages, 35 pages. I can't exactly remember. But it was around that. And look at the whole volume where it has 1, 2, 3, and 4 parts. It's this thick. He could easily have split part 4 into as many juz as he liked.
Yeah.
He didn't do that. So take any dishonesty out of the question.
Right, yeah.
He could have easily done it. I mean, in part 4, the subject matter is so vast that he could easily have split it. One of the footnotes goes over several, dozens of pages, several dozens of pages.
Mm-hmm.
Footnote 11, I believe it is.
Wow.
Only take that out, and that in its own right is a whole book. He could have done that if he wanted. So anything to do with dishonesty is completely out of the question. After that, when he said in part 4, God bless him, he was so honest to say that I'd promised more, but this seems to have ended here. I've been instructed by Allah the Almighty to move on into a different realm because I'm now being told by Allah how I need to guide the Muslim world. He wrote 80. If we take that one volume out, he wrote another 80, 83 books after that.
Yeah.
Most of the books have dual names. He says, for example, like even Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya, with the full name of which is this.
Yeah.
Aina Kamalat Islam or this. He could easily have continued. This wonderful, innocent, pious man, the promised Messiah, he could have easily continued saying, this is part 4, this is 5, this is 6, this is 7, this is 8. And here you go. I promised 50. Take 80. He could have done that. He didn't do that. What a beautiful example.
Yeah.
So, and when people objected to the fact that, oh, you took the money, but you haven't delivered the 50 volumes or, parts that you promised, he said, I'm happy to offer a refund. Doesn't that happen in the world? So how does this even become an allegation? You promise something, I'm going to write 5 volumes of this book. You take it, money in advance.
Yeah.
You write 1 volume and then you can't deliver the rest of the 4. And you say, oh, I've not been able to do that. Here's your money. How do you get that money? Do you get people swarming in saying, oh, I want my money back? You just say, no, well, I'll have to see your receipt. Just go to any bookshop. Say, Waterstone say, we're launching volume 1 today, we're launching volume 2 tomorrow. They don't launch volume 2 the following day. They would want to see a receipt that you've paid something in advance. The promised Messiah exactly said, produce the receipt. Even if you don't have a receipt, get 4 Muslims to say that they are a witness to the fact that you paid the money for the book.
Yeah.
And I'll be happy to refund it. what else do you want? Where exactly is the allegation?
Yeah.
What makes it? That was, very open and honest of him.
Yeah.
Even to say that it's seized now and I'm going to be writing something else now. I'm more focused on something else. Even to say that's very honest of him. He could have easily named all of those books Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya.
And the reason he could have is because the rest of the book were in support of Islam as well.
In support of Islam, I would say more than 300, which he initially promised.
300 arguments.
Arguments. And then people questioned him, where are those 300 arguments? And he said, well, it was a challenge for all the world religions to come back with a refutation if they could. I provided a handful of arguments in support of Islam, and I wait for them to come back with a refutation, even for these.
Yeah.
And as a wise man said, a good lawyer is not one who knows where to start. A good lawyer is one who knows where to stop. Don't you see that happening in courts? There you are. That is my argument. Go on.
Yeah.
No more, my lord. Right? So bring your refutation for that, and then we'll go. And yes, that's absolutely 100% true. Like I said, you have to read. You can't just rely on a Balvi or somebody who just sits and incites hatred against someone. How do you even want to listen to such people?
Exactly, yeah.
So forget them. They're not going to take you, me, or any other person anywhere. What have they done? I mean, I see them sitting and saying, oh, now that we've come, when we've brought this to surface, we see the Ahmadiyya diminishing in the next 10 years, 15 years. Let me tell you, I'm almost 15, turning 50 in a couple of months' time. I've seen 2 rounds of these predictions. I'm a witness to that.
Yeah.
I was 10 years old ever since I've been listening to this, that in the next 15, 20 years. And I lived in Rabwa, in a town where Ahmadis were on mute.
Yeah, in Pakistan.
We couldn't say something. But the mosques, their speakers, their amplifiers would be blaring with swear words and such predictions. I've heard them myself from the age of 10, I remember. Oh, it's going to diminish. Oh, it's going to vanish. Oh, it's just going to finish. I saw the first 20 years. I've seen another 20 years. And now I see these people, their progeny, sitting and saying, oh, another 15, 20 years. It is not going to happen. They need to realize that.
I think it's been an amazing discussion. And I think the takeaway message is to go and read Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya for yourself.
Absolutely.
Right. And like you said, even for the modern man living in 2024, it's essential to read.
It is indeed. There's absolutely no reason that one should not read and say, oh, I'll rely on such and such person's opinion. Don't.
Yeah.
They can be showing you whatever, all this, all that. What have these people done to Islam? Have they done any service to Islam?
Yeah.
Before you finish, Father, if you have a minute or two, I just want, Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya and the rest of the case of Ahmadiyya. What I don't understand, like I said, I've seen at least 2 rounds of those 20 years, and it's been going on from way before that, right?
Of course.
So many rounds have gone past. These predictions, fallen apart, fallen flat, nothing happened. What I don't understand, if something is so false, so insignificant, something that doesn't matter, something is just a lie, why have been there big, massive movements to eliminate the name of Ahmadiyya, which they have not been able to, but they continue? Why are people devoting their lives for telling the world that this is a lie? Say, for example, I told you I'm a software programmer. And then you buy my services and I try to deliver. I can't because I'm actually not. You go around, you tell, one of your friends, or don't go to this man, he's not this. And then that's it.
Yeah.
Or would you devote your life, the rest of your life, to scream in the streets, to shout at the top of your lungs, to sit and do streams of like 6 hours and 7 hours? My goodness.
Yeah.
Would you do that? Would any sensible person do that? You would find out for yourself, oh, this guy is not a software programmer. I'm never going to go to him. I'll go to such and such person.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I know that he is a software programmer, authentic, certified. So that is something for our opponents to think. That is something for people who watch them do this. there is something about Ahmadiyya
which is
that has left them in a spell for the last 135 years.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Jazakallah for that. And again, as a final note, we want our viewers to go and read Barahin-e-Ahmadiyya. We're going to link it to the show note captions as well. And there's lots more to come.